Let's bring in our military and Russia experts. Thank you all for joining us on this incredible story. Jill Doherty, I want to go to you first. The world was watching this first speech by Putin just a couple hours ago. He had been MIA. Did Putin accomplish anything from here, in this speech, aside from showing people that he's essentially still alive?
You know, I think that's very hard to judge because the two groups that he was talking to essentially are the members of Wagner who now have a choice, according to Putin. You know, join the military, go back to your families, or go to Belarus. And we still don't know. I mean, Prigozhin is saying his men are sticking with him and that very few have decided to go into the military. And then the other side is Putin wants to convince Russians everything's okay, everything's under control. The people were united. You know, it reminded me of the old Soviet days when they said, you know, the state and the people are united. That's what Putin's trying to prove. So did he accomplish that? I think it's kind of dubious right now because Russians are very confused. And I don't think Putin really did much of anything other to say, hey, be patriots, and it'll be okay.
It was a very, very short speech, and I want to play a little bit more of it. Let's take a listen.
The organizers of the rebellion, betraying their country, their people, also betrayed those who were drawn into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them to death under fire to shoot at their own. We know now that the vast majority of the fighters and commanders of the Wagner Group are also Russian patriots, devoted to their people and state. They proved it with their courage on the battlefield.
Jill, back to you. That was somewhat forgiving. Do you think that this means that the Wagner Group is going to live on? Because Prigozhin certainly thinks he's going to be able to operate in some way out of Belarus.
I don't think so. I mean, if you have 25,000, that's what Prigozhin claims, 25,000 really vicious and well-trained men, militia running around in Russia, I can't imagine that Putin would want that to happen. And if they're in Belarus, you know, it's under control of Russia. That also would be a threat. So I think he's saying this is the end. You've got three choices. Take it. And you know, he didn't say what would happen, but he, in his previous speech a couple of days ago, he did say, you know, that we will crush you. So that's the decision that they have to make.
And Biana Goldriga, we did hear from Evgeny Prigozhin today. We didn't see him, but he did double down on that long-held criticism of his of the Russian Defense Ministry. So how significant is it that we then saw Putin meeting with the Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu tonight?
Well, I don't think it was an accident. You're right to pick up on that all of a sudden we saw video of them meeting. And what's happened in the past with these meetings and these videos of Putin is you never know what's live or when something's taped. There have been instances in the past where something appeared to be live, but then an eagle-eyed observer caught the time on people's watches, and it was 8 hours prior to that. Vladimir Putin even today said good day, and then he corrected himself and said good evening. So it was clear that they were meeting today, and it was to show the Russian public and it was to show the world really, that he couldn't be pressured by Yevgeny Prigozhin to change leadership of the military, to change the defense minister, and as well as Valery Gerasimov, who is overseeing the war. No one can argue that they've done a good job in doing this. But as you know, this is a president who values dedication and loyalty above all else. And this is a president who we saw tonight doubling down so far, in his support for his military leaders.
And General Mark Hertling, Putin referenced tonight fallen pilots. We have images of a crash site. You can see it there, reportedly a Russian military plane that was taken down by Wagner forces over the weekend. So Evgeny Prigozhin does appear to have killed Russian troops. General, do you see a world in which Putin simply lets Prigozhin go live in exile in Belarus?
I don't, Alex. And what we're talking about, we have the film of the one aircraft. Open source intelligence says there were somewhere between 6 and 8 with multiple pilots being killed. That's an air attack by Mr. Prigozhin's Wagner Group against the Russian Air Force because they had air defense equipment in that march with them. But in addition to that, there have been multiple occasions where the Wagner Group has engaged ground forces of the Russian force. So we have a combination of this private military company engaging the Russians in both Ukraine and in Russia. And it is really just, as I've said before, these folks are the criminal thugs, and in some cases interspersed with some military capabilities. But we're going to see more of this. I'm not sure Prigozhin is done, but it's fascinating to me how in that 6-minute speech that Mr. Putin gave, that he went back and forth between the heroes of the Wagner group while at the same time not condemning the leader of the Wagner group, who he condemned the other day during the whole campaign. So there's just so much that is typically Russian in the way this is approaches. And if I may add one more thing, you mentioned Shoigu before. Shoigu is a martinet. He is not a military leader. He is not well liked by most of the generals in the Russian military. So the combination of most of the generals disliking him and Prigozhin absolutely detesting him is going to force Putin into some tough decisions.